PP world.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for inviting me.
So Lula is trying to flex his diplomatic muscle. Ukrainians are clearly not happy, but do you think that there might be champagne corks popping at the Kremlin at some point because of that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. They got another guy in their camp, and it's a guy pretty powerful from quite a big country. And I think it's surprising to me to hear from some of the demonstrators and protesters saying that they're surprised that Lulu, who's been in their mind fighting for democracy, or a democratic guy, being taking side of Russia. He's a socialist, and he's much closer with his ideology to Venezuelans, to the Russians, to the Cubans, and so forth, than to the Ukrainians who are fighting for their freedom and for their independence.
But wasn't Bolsonaro also quite ambiguous, to say the least, before Lula actually returned to power?
Well, his statement is ambiguous. Is that what you're saying?
Beg your pardon?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
No, wasn't Bolsonaro also fairly ambiguous on the war? I mean, he didn't even condemn this. Lula has theoretically condemned the invasion, but then said that Russia and Ukraine are equally responsible, which of course isn't the case. But isn't it something that, has to do with the position of Brazil's foreign policy in general, and is not limited to Lula's socialist affiliations?
Well, I think, again, the whole world is leaning left to the socialist ideologies. And of course, he's saying, there should be no war, let there be peace. And the Bolsheviks and the communists, they all say they're for democracies and they're for fairness and things like this. But at the same time, he goes to China and he says, okay, I agree with the Chinese leadership that the only way to peace in the region is through negotiations, which means, if you translate from the diplomatic language to the normal language, that means sacrifice of Ukraine to Putin, and that's the end of it. And Ukraine really ceases to exist. But again, we have to look at what's called reputation or trends. And where does Lulu come from? For God's sake, he's the leader of the Workers' Party. You can call it a proletariat party, Bolshevik party, whatever. It's a Workers' Party. He's a socialist. He won by the popular vote. He was charged and imprisoned for money laundering and corruption and released on technicality. And yet people, of course, they have a neighborhood they've seen from a prosperous country collapsing into the socialist utopia. Now there's hunger and things like that. They all know that all this fairness and all this ideology, socialist ideologists with free medicine, free housing, free food, free everything is very hard to compete, but ends up with a gulag and suffering of the people. And so we see where this guy's coming. He's ideologically closer to Putin and to China than to the free fighting spirit of Ukrainian people. And first thing, when he comes into the office, what does he do? He increases subsidies, free medicine. First thing he does is gun control. So the citizens who elected him, you can't trust the citizens that elected you with guns, right?
But apart from domestic policies in Brazil, because that's a totally different thing, right? But isn't it the case that we have a group of countries which are not really linked by ideology? I mean, Putin is far from being a socialist, really. I mean, he personally doesn't really like Vladimir Lenin that much because he blames him partially for the situation in Ukraine, some strange reason. However, the problem seems to be that countries such as Brazil, China, generally countries which do not share the Western view of helping Ukraine win the war, they want to propose this sort of stopgap measure, like having Ukraine, for example, cease to lay claims to Crimea, which of course is Ukrainian territory by international law, but Lula has suggested, look, Ukraine may want to give away Crimea and then the war will end. Isn't this the problem, that, trusting Russia to adhere to any peace deal at all is the problem here, because Russia has shown itself incapable of honoring any agreements like that. I mean, it was a party to the Budapest Memorandum, and look what happened.
Well, Russia has, since Putin came into power, Russia has violated every agreement that she made, international, bilateral, multilateral agreements. Every one of them has been violated. So trusting Russia, I think, is silly. Unfortunately, I think your domestic policies turn out to be what you're doing. If you're socialist internally, then it's going to be externally. You're going to have find allies that are similar to you to support your what you're doing inside of your country, arresting, killing Jews. Putin doesn't like maybe Lenin, at least he says that, but he likes Stalin, which is not much better. And of course, what they're saying is go ahead and negotiate with Russia, and this is the only way out. And all I can say is just repeat the words of the Prime Minister of Israel, Golda Meir, saying, how can you negotiate with someone who came to kill you? So, and we can see that, again, the West is not standing by its promises of, as you mentioned, of the Budapest Memorandum. It's not only a violation of Putin, it's also a violation of the Western world. We're supposed to protect Ukraine from it once they give up their nuclear weapons. Of course, now nobody now is willing to give up or stop their nuclear program because they know that these papers that they sign are not worth anything. And the only ones that will protect them is themselves.
So one quick final question. Do you believe that there is a strong enough consensus among countries such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and also the Baltics, Poland, countries from this region, to oppose these ideas for any sort of ceasefire or peace deal, which could end up actually exposing Ukraine to more of the same in the future?
Well, yes, I think the Poland is a leader, and in that, and Great Britain and Baltic states, of course, that's a coalition, and they realize what danger Russia is by looking at what's going on in Ukraine, and China is watching it with Taiwan very closely. But I think the United States, again, we have voted by supermajority of our people through Congress, and again, in Congress, both Republicans and Democrats voted for Ленд Лиза. It was signed almost a year ago by the president, but nothing has been done. And many of our military leaders and now many political leaders from both parties are saying if we wanted that war to end, we would have ended a long time ago. We're not giving Ukrainians enough weapons to do that. That's why there's a stalemate. So I think United States today is not pulling their weight, we're not doing our share, as we can see Poland, Baltic states, Great Britain, Czech Republic, Slovenia, and other former Soviet Union satellites are doing it, maybe because they're realizing the danger that's coming out of Russia right now is a great deal.
So clearly more determination and more decisive steps are required in order to allow Ukraine to help to win this war in a decisive manner, rather than suggesting that the West is prolonging the war by delivering weapons, as Mr. Lula has done, which of course doesn't really make much sense from our perspective. Yuri Tabach was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us. And you're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news and updates.